Like you all, I'd like to thank you all for coming along this evening. And I know you've already been waiting a very long time in the rain. So without further ado, could I please welcome Dan Weiss, David Benioff, John Bradley, and Kit Harington. Do you want to... the next one? Sorry. Yeah.
Hello, is this on?
Are we good?
Am I good?
Okay, so the format is just going to be, I'm going to ask the first question, then there's going to be an informal Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So my first question is about sex. Now, right? So obviously, Game of Thrones, there's a huge amount of sex in the show. How, as directors, how important is it to the way that you tell the story, and also to the actors as well? How do you guys prepare for a sex? What's going through your head, basically?
Kit?
Oh, thanks. I've got away lightly on this TV show as far as how much I reveal.
So far.
So far. Thank you. But I think my opinion of it is that my favourite TV shows have got graphic scenes of sex in them. It's something that we do, hopefully, most days.
They're not strictly speaking TV shows, okay?
Well, drink.
Yeah.
It's on a television.
Yeah. I don't know, I love it about our show. I think it's one of the things that makes it unique.
Was that your butt on TV, or is...
No, it wasn't my butt on TV. The one time I had to get naked, I couldn't because I had a broken ankle, so I dodged that bullet.
It was a ridiculous length to go to.
And Dan and David? How important is sex in the way that you kind of tell a story? Because obviously, you've introduced the word sex position, which I think is pretty strong. But,
We personally did
We
not
didn't make
introduce
that
the
up,
word
so.
sex.
Well, when we first pitched the show to HBO, you know, that was part of the pitch, was that this is a show, it's a fantasy show, but it's not Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is wonderful, and this show would not exist without Tolkien's books or Peter Jackson's movies, but I don't think any of the hobbits ever got a boner, you know, and when we were explaining our vision of the show, it's set in a fantasy world, but these are supposed to be humans, you know, and they're supposed to be real people who are obsessed with the things that real people are obsessed with, including sex. So we always said from the beginning, this is very much, it will have a graphic nature, both in terms of the sex and the violence and everything else.
Cool. And in terms of piracy, so Game of Thrones, I guess, is the most pirated show on Earth at the minute. How does that make you feel?
Winning. No, it's a difficult question because obviously you're working very hard to do something that costs lots of money to do, and if it doesn't make the money back, then it ceases to exist. On the other hand, the fact that so many people want it so badly that they can't wait to get their hands on it, it's a mixed feeling, it's an ambivalence.
We just shot in Spain, and apparently the show is more popular in Spain than anywhere else in the world, and I think that's directly because of piracy. I mean, when we first went there to scout, this was after first season, and yeah, Cooper was there, and we were meeting all these people who'd watched the show, but it hadn't actually aired there, and so of course they were all watching it illegally on the internet, and the show became more and more popular, and now people are watching it legally, and people are buying the DVDs. So I think eventually HBO gets their money, but the main thing is the show has become a phenomenon there, which is incredible for us and incredibly gratifying. And you know, if it got there by unorthodox means, I'm just glad that people are watching it.
That sounded very pro-piracy.
It did.
When you first got involved with the show, did you have any idea that it's going to become so big? And when it did, how was that? Did it were you taken aback a bit? Were you surprised? How did it affect you?
Well, I'd never come across the books I'd never come across the books or the characters before, so I didn't really know what the kind of template was for the show. The only thing that I had any prejudice about at all going into it was the fact that it was an HBO thing. And I tended to associate HBO with the best TV, the best kind of global event TV around in the last 10, 15 years. So I knew that it was going to be a kind of big deal. I knew that they'd never really done a fantasy before, so I knew it was a huge gamble for them, trying to unite the seemingly very disparate groups of people, being fantasy fans and your dyed-in-the-wool HBO audience. I know that to try and knit those two together would be a real feat if they could pull it off. But I knew that once we got our audience, once we'd managed to dispel some of the prejudice about fantasy, I think that there was enough human interest in it that we should be onto a winner if these guys keep on track and you know they've proven to do that. I had a great point then. It'll come back up later.
Yeah, I mean, I joined slightly earlier than John in the pilot. I read it again, like John. I knew it was HBO, and some of my favourite TV shows, including The Wire and The Sopranos, were HBO. So I knew, and at that point, I'd just come out of drama school. I'd done one play. This is my first venture into TV or film, and I thought, I don't think I looked at it as in, is it going to be big? Is it going to be a success? It was an HBO pilot. It was only when the first series came out and it got good reviews and it had a good viewership that I started to realise that a show does need viewers to keep existing. Until that point, I was just thrilled to be playing a character on a completely new and unique TV show. So I didn't look at it like, I never look at things like, is this going to be a success? Is this going to be big? Because that's the wrong way to go about approaching a character or a part.
I've remembered it. People say launching a new TV show is a challenge, and people say the fact that we already had a core viewership in place already from people who've read the books. They were always going to watch the show no matter what, really. So people say, is that a blessing or a curse? And I think it's a mixture of both, really. A blessing so much as you have an audience there, and a curse in so much as you've got a people who you can piss off. I mean, but if people watch a new show and don't like it, they go, don't really like that. But if people watch a new show that they know the character already and find out that show has gone against that grain and the sacrilege of messing about with those characters, that can really infuriate people more. So I think the fans of the book seem happy, though. By and large. Yeah. Wasn't worth remembering that part.
This is a little bit off subject, but I remember when we cast both these guys, and it's so long. I mean, 6 years ago, 7 years?
6 years.
6 years ago, and the first time John came into the room, we thought we had already cast the part of Samuel. We had a really wonderful young actor who had come in earlier, auditioned with us, and that guy's great. And I think we'd already made an appointment with John, so kind of out of politeness, we kept it. Just thinking like, you know, poor guy came all the way down from Manchester, it wouldn't be nice to turn him away. And John came in, and suddenly it was not just that he inhabited the character, but he made him so much more alive than I'd ever imagined, and has turned Samuel into one of our favorite characters, one of the characters that we enjoy writing for the most. Kit, the first time Kit walked into the room, I remember thinking, oh, please let this guy be good. Because I just had like an image in my mind. With most of the characters I don't, but with Jon Snow I had an image in my mind of what he should, not only what he should look like, but more what he should kind of feel like, a certain brooding intensity and a kind of haunted thing. So he comes in.
Do it.
Do Blue Steel.
Blue Steel. Brood Steel.
that was something else.
So he came in and he nailed it. I mean, he was incredible. And you know, it's these two guys, just thinking back to that day in Nina Gold's office with both of you 6 years ago, and you're both barely out of drama school, I think, right?
I'm still there.
And to think that we, you know, are now 6 years later here at the Oxford Union speaking, I mean, it's completely defies all expectations. Never would have fathomed this happening.
It's funny because your question, Mike, made me think back to, we'd shot a pilot. The pilot was almost entirely reshot because we learned it it was a very difficult sort of a hybrid between film and television, and there were a lot of things that, frankly, we didn't do right the first time out, and so we ended up reshooting a lot of the pilot, and I just remember the footage of Kit from the pilot, that some of which was very good that we would have liked to have used, but then we looked at it next to some of the newer footage we shot, and he looked 12 years old. Because he didn't have this going on. He was clean shaven, and he looked 12 years old when we shot the pilot, and now he looks every bit of 23, 24 years old.
That's the funny thing about the show, though, isn't it? I'm meant to be about 12 years old.
Yeah. So it was right.
That's what we were going for.
We're just saying you were at your best right out of the gate. It's just been. No, it goes back to your initial question about did we know it was going to be anything that anyone would watch. We didn't even know it was going to be something that got a first season. I mean, we were really in a place where for 3 or 4 months after we'd shot the initial pilot, we didn't know whether it seemed 50-50 whether or not HBO would actually pick up the show. So the answer is this is completely, still feels alien to me that we're sitting here talking to you.
And I've heard rumors about this, but how exactly did you convince George R.R. Martin to let you film the show? I mean, I've heard various different versions, so.
Well, we bought him a big steak.
Yeah. He put steak with butter.
Steak with butter.
There's butter on the steak.
Yeah, and then we talked for about 4 hours. You know, we were just talking about this before, and I think, you know, we didn't have any experience producing a television show or a movie or an internet special or anything. We'd never done anything, really. I mean, we'd written. We were both writers, but we'd never produced anything. So I think it certainly wasn't our experience that convinced George. It was just, you know, he knew we loved the books. He saw that we were passionate about it. And then at the end of this 4-hour interview, he said, and he might have had a little bit of butter in his beard, he said, "Who is Jon Snow's mother?" And I remember staring at George, who's not the most intimidating person normally, and just being so terrified at that moment, because I wanted this more than anything I've ever worked on, you know, career-wise. This, to me, when we started reading these books, I just remember, you know, those early emails and phone calls and saying, if we only get the chance, this could be something really special.
Such a weird thing, because it's usually you're up for lots of jobs, and there are things you get, there are things you don't, things happen, things don't, and this was one, I think we knew that it wasn't something that existed out there, like it was a kind of thing, a piece of material, there was one of them, and there was one place where it could happen, and one person, George, who was sort of the gatekeeper of it, and either he would say yes or he would say no, and if he said no, the opportunity to try this 1 in a million, you know, your hand at this 1 in a million piece of work was going to disappear.
So I looked at him and he looked at me, and we had been talking about this beforehand, and I said, and I gave my answer, which I'm not going to tell you because it's a big spoiler. And George was completely expressionless for about 9 seconds, which were the longest 9 seconds of my life, and then he smiled and finished the steak, and we were in. I mean, it was the right answer, and that was it.
That's amazing. Would you mind if we take some questions from the floor, from the audience? If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hand up. We will have a mic. So the young lady at the front, just please wait until you get the mic and speak loudly and clearly into it.
Dan and David, you've done such a fabulous job adapting characters who aren't POV characters in the books. I'm curious who your favorite of those type of characters has been to expand on.
What?
Pardon?
Yeah, you are a POV character. No, he's not a POV character, right?
I am, eventually.
You are? In which book?
In the third,
Yeah, you get there.
book.
You get there.
Oh, yeah, you do.
You get there. Non-POV.
Well, okay, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think you know, going back to the early seasons, Richard Madden playing Robb Stark, you know, when we saw how good Richard was, we wanted to write more for him. And as great a character as he is, he kind of falls out a little bit in the books because he's not a POV character. So you hear about his exploits, but you only see him when he comes into contact with Catelyn or one of the other POV characters. And Richard was so good, I just remember watching with Dan those episodes from season 1 and thinking, we need more of him in season 2. We can't just be away from him for that long. So I guess Robb Stark.
Who else is a non-POV character that we've really... probably a lot.
Littlefinger.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know. I obviously know the books very well, but I don't remember necessarily which characters are POV characters because it's been so long since we've thought of it in that. Because one of the first things we had to do was stop thinking about it that way and start thinking about each character individually. And so it's been a while since I've actually thought about the books in that way.
Next question. The young lady with the great heart.
Hi, my name's Kate. Obviously, you've had to learn a lot of kind of things like sword fighting, horse riding, surviving in like the wilds of Iceland, etc. For the show. I was just wondering if you yourselves were put into the actual like environment that Jon Snow and like Sam have to live in. Do you think you would survive, or like how long?
I don't think Sam would survive. Would he?
No.
John, in your estimation, how long would Kit survive in a Jon Snow-like environment?
In a Jon Snow-like environment? Longer than me. But people say, just with regards to, you know, horse riding and sword fighting and things, my advice to all young actors is to seek out characters who are terrible at everything. Just go for them. If a character can't sword fight, can't horse ride, can't do anything, really go for it, because you'll have a lot of free afternoons while people like him are in a quarry somewhere throwing a sword about. But in terms of survival, shooting the pre-credit sequence in season 3, where it's supposed to be a continuation from the end of season 2, where Sam's still running from the White Walker. I had to run from about the end of the stairs to about those stairs over there. And in deep snow, in fairness to me, with a fairly heavy costume on. And I got to the end of there every single time when I was exhausted. And I said, just out of interest, how long do you reckon Sam would have been running for? And they said, we've worked out about 12 hours. And it's a terrible moment where you realise that Samwell Tarly is fitter than you are.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd survive very long at all. Honestly, in Game of Thrones world, I'd like to. I've always thought, now that I've got, we've done a lot of sword fighting, it's all very choreographed and well put together. I've always wondered, like, if me and an actor just went at each other with like the fake swords, like how long would it take for someone just to get hit on the head? And I've not tried it yet, but I was thinking, like, I'm going to try it with Christopher. Just like if we just had went at each other with rubber, not metal swords, like rubber sword. Like how long it would take. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how good at actual sword fighting I am.
In fairness to Kid, who's very humble, the stunt guys, because we asked them, okay, who's good at this stuff, and they always say #1 Kit Harington.
There was a scene last year. There was a scene that we were looking at a scene. We were in the editing room, and we asked the editor. We said, take whatever speed up effect you put on that 1 second shot of Kit swinging a sword. Take it off. It looks fake. And they looked on their computer and they said that there's no speed up effect on that shot. That's Kit swinging the sword. So he's actually very good at fake sword fighting.
Okay, so the next question. We'll go to the front row, the guy with the green hoodie.
Hi, this one's for Kit. My friend here, it's her birthday this week, and she's in love with you. I wondered if you could...
What are we going to do? So we have to give her a hug? I don't know.
If you could just come over here and just give her a bit of a hug.
Yeah. Happy birthday. It's just Jon Snow's type. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so next question. No more hug requests, please. So we'll go just across on the front row. No, straight ahead of me. Yeah.
I have a question for like all of you. If you could be any character, I mean, including yourselves, which one would you be in real life? Like, if you had to be in Game of Thrones, which one would you choose to be?
John?
Is that your answer?
Not Samuel, just John.
Do you mean who would I be? Or who would I choose to be?
Who would you want to be?
I've always had a real soft spot for Lord Varys. Oh, shut up, Oxford Union.
The soft spot for you.
Just because I think he's he's a fascinating character, somebody who can. He's almost like kind of Agent Orange or something. He's something that can permeate things without really being seen and influence things. He's very Teflon. He can influence decisions and influence very powerful people without ever really being notably apparently doing so. And I think that kind of power, that kind of very subtle and subversive power, is very attractive.
I'd like to be a warg. I'd like to like put myself into a wolf.
We should just stop now. It's not going to get any better than that.
Two words for you. Season 6. Season 6.
Keep drinking, please.
I'll leave it at that.
I would be Tywin Lannister. I think he's a badass, and or he was. Spoilers, sorry. Until the very end, just because he's, I think Tywin gets a bad rep because he's not the nicest guy. He's not the most. He's got a certain hardness to him, but I think he makes really good points when he ends the war with the Red Wedding, and everyone's really upset about it. And he points out to Tyrion, why is it any worse to murder 20 people at a wedding than it is 10,000 people on a battlefield? And Tyrion, who's always the most eloquent person, what does he doesn't respond because there is no response. So I kind of like Tywin's realpolitik. I don't mean like it, like I want to be his buddy, but if I was if I could be anyone in the world, I guess to be Tywin and dominate.
I'm just trying to think of all of our characters, who's the happiest? And I feel like the answer was well, there was Mord, the jailer from episode 106. And I think Oberyn Martell was probably the happiest right up until the moment that his head got crushed like a watermelon. So if I could be Oberyn Martell with a 1% more sense to step away from the 400-pound man who is not dead quite yet, that's who I'd be, Oberyn Martell, who's smart enough to not get his head crushed like a watermelon.
The girl in the scarf there. Yeah.
First of all, Kit, my mom says hi. I study medieval history, and I always describe it to people as Game of Thrones except real life. So I was wondering to what extent medieval history and kind of orienting the Game of Thrones world within this pseudo-medieval setting comes into your writing of the show, and more broadly than that, real life and reality outside of the world of Westeros.
I think that one of the things that's wonderful about working in a grounded fantasy setting, is by which we mean like grounded in history more than mythology or legend, is that you get to cherry pick all the best bits of history without, and add shape to them and structure to them. So it's really a chance. I mean, George himself is a very much a student of history, and George can talk for hours about the Battle of Thermopylae, and he can talk for hours about the War of the Roses, and he can talk, for a long time about all these things, and they've informed the way he shapes his world, and they inform the complexity of his world, and it just feels like you get a chance to do history with all of the good parts and dragons and demons. So it's definitely, we try to keep it grounded in that historical reality as much as we can, and make people react to the fantastical elements the way that real people would react to them, which is with awe and wonder and fear, and not seeing magic as something that is everyday, because for most of them it's not.
Next question, we'll move across the side. So the young lady straight ahead of me in the white shirt, I think.
What was your favourite scene to do?
Favourite scene?
I think the scene in that first episode on top of the wall where Sam explains to John everything about his backstory and everything about his life, because that was the scene that I auditioned with. So to do that in the audition, then to do that in front of the camera on the set, felt like a kind of validation almost. It felt like a long journey from audition to that day. But the thing I like the most about that scene is that's the scene that makes Sam make sense. In terms of, up until that point, he's just as much of a mystery to John and the other guys of the Night's Watch as he is to the viewers. He just seems like a complete mystery bag. He turns up out of nowhere. He's joined this band of fighting brothers, yet he can't fight. He gets bullied from the moment he walks in. And you don't like him instantly, or I didn't when I read it, because I just thought that he's somebody who's helpless and weak, and he's putting himself into these positions. But when he explains all that to John, you get a sense of just how impossible his life is and how impossible his situation is. And it's only when you know all that backstory about his father and everything that he becomes a character that you can relate to. Before that, he's just a lump of meat that gets beaten. Meat and a good bit of fat on it. But after that, he becomes a character that you relate to, and that scene is the beginning of Sam as a character.
So you're saying the most fun you've had on the show was the very first scene you shot?
It's been downhill.
5 years ago.
No, I didn't say that's when I had the most fun. I said that was my favourite scenes of fun.
Very eloquent.
Beaten meat.
Yeah. Mine was the end of season 2. A lot of my favourites were in season 2. The first scene where John meets Egret. Sorry, look, my favourite scenes are this season, but I can't tell them about it. The first time John meets Egret at the top of by that glacier, that was one of my favourites, and also the fight with Corin Halfhand at the end of season 2 was. I always like the fight scenes. I'm a real sucker for a fight scene, and that fight scene was one of the hardest. If you ever tried running through sand, like trying to fight in deep snow is incredibly difficult, and I found it was so tiring that me and Simon Armstrong, who played Corin, were just at the edge of tears the whole time, because it was that exhausting. But it made for what is in Thrones, one of my favourite scenes that I'm in is that one. I really enjoyed that.
Next question. So, is the girl just 3 or 4 people down the road?
Hi. If you could bring back any character that you've killed, who would it be? And who would you most enjoy killing off that's still alive?
Well, are you saying bring back for us? Do you mean for the show, or do you mean just to
for
have
yourself? Like,
for
who's
ourselves?
who would you like to see more of?
Jason Momoa.
Jason and Pedro. Jason
Yeah.
Momoa and Pedro Pascal, probably.
Yeah.
Together. As a couple.
A good couple. Yeah, Momoa was just, Momoa is kind of exactly what you would think Momoa would be like. He's just more fun than anyone to hang out with, to have around on set. And in fact, we brought him back second season for a kind of dream sequence, mainly just so we could have him back on set for a couple of days. And then I made the mistake of, we all went out drinking afterwards, Jason and Amelia Clark and Dan and I, and we're drinking, and there's a story about the mouse who's in the barroom mouse who and someone's left the tap on, so he's lapping up the beer, and he gets so drunk, and he says, "Now where's that damn cat?" So I was drinking too much, and I said, "Momoa, come on, let's play that mercy game that you're so good at," and which is a game involving slapping hands. And anyway,
Well, Momoa weighs 245 pounds.
yeah, I was really drunk. Anyway, so I ended up in the emergency room. But despite all that, true story. Despite all that, yeah, I'd love to have Momoa back. Oh, sorry.
So next question.
They don't get to vote.
We'll come back.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't there a second half to that question? Oh, who do we like to kill?
Yeah, that was the second half.
Right.
Who do you want to
Who
kill?
do we want to kill?
We just love everybody so much. Who do you want to kill?
It's impossible to say.
There's nobody.
I'll tell you afterwards.
There's one person.
There's one guy. Yeah.
Awful.
Total dick.
How about character?
Oh,
I mean, they're all dying anyway.
Oh, characters,
so.
right. Characters killed. But I know the ones who are the worst are also the ones who are sometimes the most fun to write for. It was a huge, setting aside what a lovely human being Jack Gleason is, as some of you probably know, because he was sitting up here proving that he's actually lovely and intelligent and articulate and not at all like his character. That you lose a lot when you lose a Joffrey from your world, because who else is going to do the things that he does? Except 5 or 6 other characters.
There in the second row.
This one's for Kit. So obviously John has a very hard choice between going back to the Night's Watch or staying with the Wildlings and with Ygritte. And what do you think you yourself would have done in that situation? Would you have done what John did, or would you have...
No, I would have stayed with Ygritte. It's a good question, and seriously, I would have stayed with Ygritte. Like, he chooses... And this is something that I kind of couldn't get on board with him about, is why he leaves her. But he does, and it's because the major difference between me and John is that he's less selfish than I am. I would want to stay with my lovely girlfriend who I was in love with. He realises his duty is to his brothers, the people he's sworn an allegiance to, and that's inevitably why he does it. But there was a scene which got cut out eventually that I think was that showed him getting up and leaving Ygritte and looking at the wall in the distance, and he could leave that morning, and he didn't. He turned around and went back to her. And I think what that showed is that there was a really great struggle in him about, it wasn't that simple, that he wasn't always planning to leave. It was a real tussle-up. But no, I sometimes wonder where John's head is with these things.
Right at the very front, just guy. Oh, Lucio's just here, it's just the guy on this front row.
At this point in the show, you're pushing right up against the point in the books where nothing else is available. Like a couple of characters are almost at the end of their storylines.
What part of England are you from?
I'm from
Wales.
Arkansas.
Nice.
So, yeah, I guess my question is, how do you feel about potentially telling Martin's story before he gets to?
John? Seriously.
We've been talking to him for a while about this. It's the fact is we didn't want to catch up. obviously, we would hope that the books would come out ahead of the show. But at the same time, George has his process, and if it takes him 20 years to finish the series, that's what it should take him. I mean, he's writing, to my mind, the great epic of our, the great fantasy epic anyway, of our time. So we can't rush him, and I wouldn't want to rush him. And at the same time, we can't put the show on hiatus. You know, we've got all these actors, wonderful cast. I mean, I think the greatest cast ever assembled for a television show, and we can't take a 2-year break because, you know, these guys are in demand and they're going to go off and do other stuff. So we have to kind of keep pushing forward. Luckily, we've been talking about this with George for a long time, ever since we saw this could happen. And we know where things are heading. So we'll eventually basically meet up at pretty much the same place where George is going. There might be a few deviations along the route, but we're heading towards the same destination. I kind of wish there are some things that we didn't have to spoil, you know, in terms of for the books, but we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So the show must go on. Just came up with that, and that's what we're going to do. And you know, luckily George is. I think the thing that's kind of fun for George is the idea that he can still have surprises for people, even once they've watched the show through to the conclusion. There are certain things that are going to happen in the books that are different from the show, and I think people who love the show and want to know more about the characters, want to know about the different characters who might not have made the cut for the show, will be able to turn to the books. So that's where we stand.
So this is actually kind of a follow-up, two-pronged question. So do you two know where the books are heading? Do you tell them? And for example, do you know who Jon Snow's mother is?
No, in all honesty, I have no idea where the books are going. I have no idea who Jon Snow's mother is. These gentlemen here don't tell us, and I wouldn't ask.
No, I like not knowing. I think if I don't know, then Sam won't know, logically, and Sam wouldn't know. So do you know what I mean? It's nice that I can go on those journeys with Sam. These next few books are going to be interesting because I think the next book is the first book that he's written knowing who's going to play the parts when the... So it'd be interesting to see how that affects the characters. I hope it doesn't. I hope he sticks with his idea of the characters because they are slightly different. But it's going to be interesting for us to see kind of how it all pans out.
Going back to the audience, so just in the third row, gentleman, just with the glasses.
Hi. What's the most uncomfortable thing you've had to do during your time at Game of Thrones?
Getting smashed around the back of the head and all down the back with a rubber sword on my first day. because I'm a bit, or I was a bit, stupid. I didn't know how a day's filming TV works, because I went to a theatrical drama school, so I just thought they set loads and loads of cameras up. We ran through it a couple of times, and then that's a wrap. When I read on the call sheet we had one scene to do, I was wondering what I was going to do with my afternoon. And then when you're still there 12 hours later getting beaten up really badly on your first day, you start to think, you know, maybe that careers officer at school had a point when he mentioned working in a building society or something like that. But the show lets us be uncomfortable. And I think if the characters are uncomfortable, it helps a bit if the actors are quite uncomfortable, don't you think?
Yeah, I disagree to an extent. No, I think the locations that we're put in, like Iceland in -40 and blizzards, and I mean that's what the world that we're meant to be in is, and I love the location work on this. I love that we're put in those places. Most annoying thing, I think.
Hang on, you just agreed with what I said there.
Yeah, I know. I backed up. Fake blood is made of sugar syrup, and wasps love sugar syrup. So whenever you've got fake blood in your face, you spend the whole scene like trying to get rid of the wasp. the most uncomfortable I've been in a scene. So not bad, really.
Most uncomfortable I've been is the two of us sitting in a room for an hour and a half with the president of HBO in 2009 explaining why he shouldn't cancel our show before it even begins. I was hugely uncomfortable for that entire hour.
How did you convince him?
What'd you say? David said something amazing. And then he said yes.
Just a big steak. That seems to be your answer to all. Treat TV executives like lions.
Yeah.
Next. Next question. Choose.
Jen in the purple T-shirt. Yeah.
So for the writers, I was wondering if you had the creative freedom, whether there was any other fictional series or individual books that you'd love to be able to adapt. And for the actors, what fictional characters you'd ideally like to play, if you have one in mind. Maybe one who knows a bit more than Jon Snow does.
Nice. Oh, for us, well,
forgot about that.
There's a book called Dirty White Boys, actually, that we just signed on to write and direct, and Dirty White Boys, completely different. I think after this, I think you want to try to avoid getting put into any kind of niche. It's very easy if you're a writer in Hollywood. They'll start thinking of you if you've done a fantasy series. Okay, those are the fantasy guys. So. And I think after this one's done, I can't really imagine doing another, because nothing for me is going to top Game of Thrones. I mean, Game of Thrones has been the experience of a lifetime, and so to do something completely different, I think is very appealing for both of us. The Dirty White Boys is set pretty much present day, Oklahoma, and no swords, no dragons, no visual effects. Just very excited for that.
But we'll have to learn how to shoot people in cars.
Yes.
And there are all sorts of things that have people on horses. There are a million things you need to know and learn about shooting people on horses. Shooting people in cars is something we've never had to do because obviously there are no cars. So it'll be fun to figure out interesting ways to shoot people in cars.
I'd probably avoid anything too fantasy orientated or swords.
Pompeii 2?
Pompeii 2. No, my favourite book was always 1984, so I'd like to be in that.
Who would you be in 1984?
The main guy escapes my memory. The main guy.
Not the guy, not the
what's
bad
his
guy.
face?
Winston.
Yeah.
Winston
Smith.
Winston Smith, yeah.
Key. I'd love to go back and have another stab at those big Chekhovian roles that I was given at drama school. I think I was given it at a time in my life where I'd had pretty much zero life experience of the type that the characters have had. And now 8 years down the line, and I've felt what they felt, and I've come close to feeling some of that desperation, that sense of abandonment and loneliness.
And you've been selling your orchards and everything. So
Yeah. I just love to have another stab at those now with a more mature mindset and
the other day we were talking about Pierre Bezukov from War and Peace. We think that you would be the ideal, 10 years down the road, the ideal Pierre from War and Peace.
You remember Pierre?
Pierre.
Oh, Pierre, yeah.
From that book.
10 years down the, I won't go booking any holidays.
You're a bit young. Keep it in mind. File it away.
What's his name?
Andre,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. That would actually work really well.
Yeah. We'll talk about this afterwards.
Yeah.
Gonna go back to the back of the room. So there's a gentleman with his hand up, just in the middle of the back section there.
Hey guys, big fan. I read all the books, and then 2 years later the show came out. I was extremely excited, and so I'm wondering, because you guys both just said you hadn't read the books, to the producers, why do you not have your actors read the books? And then to the actors, especially since so many people are being killed off, right? Isn't it kind of in your best interest to know if you need to look for work, maybe? So.
Well, first of all, there are people who don't live on in the books, who do live on in the show, and people who die earlier in the show than they do in the books. But our feeling is that there are actors who will read the books comprehensively, and there are actors who never look at the books, and whatever makes them feel most comfortable, whatever they feel is going to give them the best shot at doing the best work, that's what we support.
Yeah, just to be clear, we've never told the actors not to read the books, and there's some actors who really want to know where their character is going, and there are a lot of actors who, like John, would prefer not to go because their character doesn't know in the moment. So it's completely, we leave it up to the cast.
Yeah, I read the books. The minute I got the part, I went and bought all of them and read them, mainly out of curiosity about what might be happening. Also I felt I had a source material there. And whenever I've got a source material, I feel that, for me anyway, I need to look at all information I can gather about that fictional character. I've said this before, but I also, weirdly, my first job was at Waterstone's bookshop. And I used to stack the bloody books every day. So I kind of knew them weirdly, like that, in the fantasy section.
Yeah. I've never had a proper job, so been stuck in anything. I think that what you have to bear in mind is we're carrying on with this template of 10 episodes a season, so it's 10 hours. And if you look at the size of these books, they're pretty hefty old tomey books. I mean, there's 600 pages. So we realised that to condense those into 10 hours, some stuff's going to have to go, some things are going to be conflated, some things are going to be changed around a little bit. So the last thing you want to do as an actor is to read ahead and then really get your heart set on something. Spend a few years posing in front of the mirror and working out how you're going to do it, and you get the script and it's not in there. So I think we have to be faithful to our personal, unique source material and trust those guys that what they want to stay in on merit stays in, and what they think the show can do without, I don't think we need to concern ourselves with that.
As a follow-up to that, so has reading the books influenced the way that you act out the character? How do you use that sort of source material, as you said, to sort of reach your own interpretation of the character?
Well, for good or bad, for me, if you read the first description of John, it informed. I think for my audition, I bought the book, read the first description of John, read a bit to get an idea of it, and then went in with that. But it's already in the book that he's quiet, he's quite sort of dour in a way, he's like the black sheep of the family. Within that first paragraph about who he was and what his sort of essence was like, gave me that first sort of tap into how I should do that first audition, and then that template stays with you for 6 years of what character you've made. That's the way if I have something like that to go on, the way I work is I'll look at exactly what the writer or these writers or the writer of the book thinks this person is, and try and tell that story.
Going back to what I said before, I was very fortunate that the scene that I auditioned with was that exposition piece, that monologue that he has on top of the wall, because the writing in that speech is so economically perfect and yet so descriptive and so impassioned that you come out of that 30 seconds of screen time knowing exactly who that character is. Sometimes you can read and read and read, but if it's worded properly, if it's written with a certain veneer of class to it and a certain economy, you know everything you need to know in 30 seconds. And I think that's why these guys are so great, because they know that the books are very, very descriptive, very verbose when it comes to their descriptions of things. They know we've not really got time to let those descriptions breathe, so they're boiling them down to their very essence, which is great tools to have as actors.
The lady right at the back there, yes.
Hi. So, yeah, same. Big fan of the show. Really appreciate you guys being here tonight. I had a question about well, in general, about how women are represented in the show, because I think on the whole the show does a pretty good job. You've got a lot of female characters that aren't just stereotypical strong female characters. You've got a real range of personalities. But with that in mind, I was wondering specifically about a scene from series 4, specifically what I call the rape scene, which is where Cersei and Jaime, well, where Jaime forces Cersei to have sex next to her son's grave. Now, people have interpreted this differently, but it did cause a lot of controversy when it came out. So I was sort of wondering what your thoughts were on that, why you included it, what you felt it contributed to the character arcs of specifically Jaime, and what your thoughts would be on dealing with this kind of material in the future, because this caused so much of a controversy.
John?
Just to take the last question first, I would hope that it would not affect at all our future writing on the series, the fact that it created controversy, because I would hope that we have the courage to write what we think is the show demands for that particular scene, regardless of what the reaction is going to be. As far as the scene itself, I think you're right to be disturbed by it. I think it was a brutal scene. I think it was incredibly well acted by both Lena and Nikolai. And it was a very, very difficult day. It was a difficult thing to shoot. It was difficult to be with the actors that day. I mean, Lena is someone who gets so into the role. She's part of the reason she's such a brilliant actress is because she becomes Cersei. And as soon as the director calls action, she becomes Cersei. And so that was a really rough day for her. And I thought she performed it brilliantly. And it was a brutal thing to watch, but it felt to us when we were writing it like this is something the character was going to do at that moment, and it's a horrible thing to do. And at the same time, I think part of the reason it was so hard for some people is because Jaime's had this kind of redemptive arc, and it feels like he's becoming a good guy, and that's true. He did a lot of heroic things in previous seasons, and he saved Brienne and all sorts of stuff, but we also can't remember this is a guy who in the very first episode shoved a little boy out a window. He's not a good guy. He's a very complex guy. He's not. And one of the things we loved about the books from the beginning is that there are so many characters like this who are not so easily aligned. You can't put them in Dungeons and Dragons alignments of lawful good or chaotic evil. I don't know where you would align Jaime Lannister. And in that particular scene, given what he had been through in the past and his tortured relationship with his sister, this felt like something he would do. And it's again, not bringing judgment on it, but that's so we're going to write it, without regard for whatever furor it might create. And to our kind of amazement, it actually, that scene led to a front page article in the New York Times. Which is the paper of record in the country where we're from, and also a newspaper which has never failed in 4 seasons to pan our show. So it was kind of amazing to see that the fictional interaction between 2 fictional characters became front page news. But there you have it.
I think, if I might add, that one of the things I think our show is exciting about our show is it does cause controversy and it does cause discussion. And also, rape does happen on a daily basis in marriages between apparently good people and bad people, and I think it's right to write scenes like that and for people to view it. I don't know. I think that's my opinion.
The gentleman there in the black jacket.
This is for John and Kit. You said that you don't know what's going to happen to your characters, but what do you think is going to happen to your characters? Where do you think they're going to end up? And then for Kit, who do you think John's mum is, like, if you had to guess?
Who do I what, sorry?
Who do you think John's mother is, if you had to guess?
I don't really have a theory and I don't have an opinion, and for any kind of theory or opinion I've heard, I don't express which one I think is right. I sort of side with John's sentiment on this, which is that he doesn't know who his mother is. It doesn't help me to know who his mother is as an actor playing the character. I don't try and theorise about it. I've never asked these guys. I would never dare. And as far as what happens to my character or where they end up, I know what happens in the books. But I don't try and, again, there's no point in trying to guess ahead. Really at all. I don't know, it's a boring answer, but I try not to think too far ahead or try and predict, because it's that way madness lies.
I'd like to think that Sam would be happy at the end of it. And I think one of the most endearing things about the character of Sam is just what little it takes to make him happy. I mean, he's a man who's so damaged by life and damaged by his childhood and in so desperate need of what we call therapy these days, I think, that his life has just been so barren of affection and love, and he's been treated so harshly by the people who should be loving him more than anybody else in the world. I think that all he needs is a little bit of love and a bit of tenderness. I don't think he wants the Iron Throne. I don't think he'd know what to do with it. He doesn't want to be rich. His desires in life are so basic and things that most people take for granted that I think it's perfectly doable that he can be happy. But in terms of ultimately, I don't think Sam's going to get a heroic death. I've often said I don't think Sam's going to get run through the face with a spear defending somebody. I think he's going to probably have a cardiac arrest running up the stairs. So I think out of all the people in the show, or the characters in the show and in the books, Sam is the person whose needs, or one of the people whose needs and desires and expectations from life are the simplest. And for most people in everyday contemporary society, perfectly achievable. But for him, he feels that to be loved and respected and shown some tenderness is as outlandish a desire as most people's are for the Iron Throne, for example. No.
Next questions. So the girl just on the very end of the row, sorry.
Hi, sorry. I was just wondering, what would you say to the die-hard fans of the books that have stopped watching your show or haven't watched your show as much as they used to because they think that you've sort of changed it too much from the books?
I mean, it's entirely everyone's right to watch or not watch whatever they want. I mean, it's obviously, we would love to think that everyone who is familiar with the source material would want to see the show, but I think I can project myself into their position and understand why you might not want to, and I have no animosity towards them at all. I get it. I just everyone is going to do what they're going to do. I just from the beginning we've known that there's a core, as John alluded to earlier in the discussion. We've known that there's a core group of people who were out there in the world who love these books, and then that was a huge bonus for us because we knew that there was this relatively large group of people who are interested and invested from the very first episode, which is a rare luxury in television. We also knew that our audience needed to be much bigger than that group of people if the show were to be sustainable, because it's a very elaborate production just by its nature. So we're never trying to cater to the fans exclusively, because if we did, it would be the end of the show. So we hope they love it, and we've met many book fans who do love it and who understand even the discrepancies and the differences, who understand why we do those things and where they come from, and we understand that there will always be a certain group of people who don't agree with the choices we make, and that's okay, and we respect that. We respect that decision on their part.
And from a purely business point of view, it depends if they were illegally downloading it or not. If they were illegally downloading it, fine. If they were paying for it, come back.
So to the girl who I originally pointed to just on the edge of the row. Yeah.
Hi. Have you ever nicked anything, borrowed anything from the set? And if you have, what is it? And if you haven't, what would you want to take home with you?
Long claw. I'd like to take my sword back. I've got my eyes on that. There's some really good furniture on set.
Some cracking furniture.
Wouldn't mind like some of the rugs are really nice and like. Just bought a flat and so I'm looking to kind of furnish it.
Yeah. I'd take my cloak home and then fucking burn it somewhere and then not have it when I come back.
Next question. To the guy, would you mind just going around? Red tie.
Thanks. As writers, how do you decide when to deviate from the books? Is it necessity? Is it your personal disposition towards a character? Or is it something else entirely?
It just varies from case to case. I mean, sometimes it's sometimes the characters in the show begin to deviate from the characters in the books purely from the casting. You know, and I think one example of that would be Osha. As soon as we cast Natalie Tanya. Am I pronouncing that right? Natalia Tanya? Thank you. She was so different than the character Osha was described, and she just had a very different energy, and so we started to write for that energy. And when we first auditioned Lena Headey for Cersei, she was funny, and I never remembered Cersei from the book being funny at all. And not to say, not kind of like a, one-liner kind of funny, but just a very dark, sarcastic humor. And so, it made us laugh, and we started to write to that too a bit. So a lot of it is the casting. Some of it is just when you compress storylines, certain changes have to be made. And sometimes it's just things that work really well in the book because you are able to access the characters' minds that we don't think would work as well in the show because we're not in the characters' minds. We don't have voiceover, we don't have anything, we don't have interior monologues. So it's just what's going to work best on screen is very often different than what works well on page.
Do you want to do that?
At the back there in the grey jumper.
I was just wondering, obviously I know you're saying how grateful you are that it's got such a huge following and how successful it's been, but if you'd known just exactly how big it would have got, do you think that the cost of fame, the sort of the lack of privacy and the kind of the difficulties that come with the lifestyle of like Sony's in the public eye would have put you off becoming a part of the making of Game of Thrones? Do you think you might have chosen not to take that audition or not to write that script?
Ask the famous people.
It's a really good question. I think the way I look at Thrones or being an actor now is I don't get paid for the acting or being on set. That's free. I'd do that for free. What I get paid for... Take that back.
Can you say that?
Shit. What I get paid for is my loss of anonymity. Is the fact that with a show like Thrones, which is so globally watched and has become a very, very big show, and a lot of the time I have to walk around with this appearance, you do get spotted a lot, and I feel like that has infringed upon my life by quite a lot, but that's what I get paid for. That's the bit that when someone asks for a photo or you get stopped in the street a lot, even if you're in a really bad mood, you go, well, this is my job. This is what I sought out. This is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an actor, and I'm lucky to have notoriety in that way. So I don't ever really feel like I wouldn't be a part of this show because of that. If I could go back in time and do exactly the same thing, I would, because I've had an incredible time with it, and that's just a slight problem on the side.
I would just say, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if I've seen a more gracious, famous person than Kit, just in terms of the stuff he's describing, because we work with a lot of actors, and I know other actors from back home, and a lot of people won't take that picture with you and won't be friendly if they are approached on the street, and the fact that Kit is so constantly so cordial with everyone is pretty damn impressive. So, cheers to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers to Kit.
He's got no drink.
We've probably got time for maybe 3 or 4 more questions, so I'm going to... The guy directly behind you.
As writers of the show, and obviously as actors as well, you've probably had a lot of interviews and just chats with fans across the world at Comic-Con events, that sort of stuff. What are the funniest and most outlandish theories you've ever heard from the fans about like future plot points or stuff like that?
Sure, there's a good answer to your question somewhere in my jet lag brain, but I can't find it. Where?
Someone asked me, someone had a theory that it was going to be kind of a Planet of the Apes ending where it turns out this is all happening on planet Earth and there's going to be like, where Jon Snow is going to discover the arm of the Statue of Liberty sticking out. Something like that. That was pretty good. I don't remember.
Does that mean he's around till the end? Does that mean he's around till the end?
No. No, this was the crazy fans theory, so yeah. I don't have anything else really, sorry.
Next question. We'll go across the hall just to the guy on the very edge with a blue jumper, I think. Do you want to choose the last one?
Which character do you think has made the hardest decision or choice so far in shows?
Which character?
Yeah, which character in the shows has made the hardest decision?
I would say
so
probably
far?
this guy over here. Yeah. It's hard to think of a harder choice than that.
I'd say John as well, just because we all ask ourselves if we had to choose between head and heart, which would we go for? And we'd like to say heart, I think. I think we'd like to say that we'd like to be ruled by instincts, and we wouldn't really let social dogma or mores or allegiance to any arbitrary thing come in the way of that. But I like to think that, I hate to think that, in actual fact, I think most of us would chicken out and go with the norm and do what is expected of us rather than what we actually want to do. Which he did, didn't he?
Which he sort of did.
Yeah, he did, yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think that's a really difficult choice put into our story in a huge way. But I think we can relate to that, and we have that same problem all our lives in much more manageable ways.
I suppose for me personally, the decision to push a 9-year-old boy out a window would be agonizing. But I'm not sure that it was agonizing for the person who made the decision, so I don't think that counts.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to season 1, also Ned Stark, because I think Ned was he knew it was over for him, and I think he was, the one thing he had left was his dignity and his honor and the opportunity to go out, have an honorable death. You know, I think that's what he wanted at that point, really. And so to just be up there and to, you know, give this false confession in the hopes that it would make things better for his family. I think that was him sacrificing the last thing he had left, which was most important to him, and which he passed on to John, of course. So, and I just, you know, thinking back to that and how Sean Bean played those scenes. You know, it's when we went into the casting process, we basically had no idea who was going to fill any role except for Ned. We wanted Sean Bean, and George did as well. We agreed on that, and Tyrion, we wanted Peter, and
Charles Dance.
And Charles Dance.
Those were the three.
To the girl in the front row, is that?
Some of the scenes in Game of Thrones are really gruesome. I know for me the torture scenes with Theon were particularly, like, they stayed with me for quite a long time. So I wondered what it was like on set filming scenes like that. Do they stay with you after you've finished filming?
I know for Uwan and Alfie, who do those scenes, that they can be very long, arduous, and emotionally quite exhausting days for them. I've seen them come back from set, and I was like, "How's your day?" And just the look on their face tells you everything. I think, yeah, if you're going to invest as yourself as an actor in that kind of a storyline, and have to, as Alfie does brilliantly, and Uwan has to invest so much of yourself. I think in this show, yeah, that I know that it exhausts them, that they put everything into it. and they come back wrecked from those scenes?
The scenes that are most stressful for me to watch, because I'm sitting there behind the monitors, but the ones for me are the ones involving babies. And last year we had a scene with the baby being placed on this ice altar, which was actually ice. I mean, it was a carved block of ice. It wasn't plexiglass or anything. And it's a real baby, and the baby started crying, which was perfect for the scene, but it's also horrible because there's a baby crying, and your instinct, if you're any kind of human being, is to comfort the baby. And I just remember sitting there with the mother, who was she didn't seem to be freaking out, but I was kind of like looking at her like this lady's baby is lying on a block of ice, and then a demon walked over and picked up the baby, and it was so horrible. It was just, because at that point you're basically torturing a poor little innocent child. So that was the roughest one for me.
Last question in the green jacket. Yeah. We got here.
So the cast of Game of Thrones has a relatively high turnover rate. Is that a challenge, or do you see that as an advantage? And do you spend all your time organising leaving parties?
It's something that we knew going into this show. Obviously, we'd read the source material that existed up to that point, and we knew that this was the kind of story this was, and it was what attracted us to it. It was one of the part of our initial sales pitch, as it were, to HBO was that it's not. If I watch 24, I'm never wondering whether Jack Bauer is going to live or die. I'm just wondering how he's going to get out of this situation. And this was, from the first book, this was a story that really felt like it cleaved closer to real life in that way, where everyone is in jeopardy. Anybody can go at any minute, and it made the time you spend with those characters that you love so much that much the more precious. So it's something that we kind of steeled ourselves for going into it. I mean, that said, you spend so much time with these people who become like your second family, and you live with them, and you work with them, and you eat with them, and you drink with them, and it is when someone like Richard or Michelle or Jason or any of these, or Rose or any of these people are no longer a part of your life. It's painful. It's not enjoyable to say goodbye to people that you love, even though they're not gone. You can see them again, but they're not going to be a part of your life the way they were for the years that they were on the show, and there's something sad about that.
That's what I find the most heartbreaking thing, because of the way the show is structured and everybody's fragmented and compartmentalized into these different things. We can watch the rest of the show like fans almost. I feel I can watch a Daenerys storyline or a Rob storyline as somebody who doesn't have anything to do with it. So the double whammy, the double blow comes from when you have to say goodbye to two people at once. When it crushes you to say goodbye to the character and crushes you again to say goodbye to the actor. That's when you really get a sense of the transience of this show. You're saying goodbye to people all the time.
Yeah, and there's a before we deliver the scripts to actors who are going to perish in that script, we make the phone call, which has become kind of a tradition, and it's not that much fun. But usually, people are quite gracious about it and everything. And this year, for the first time, we got some pushback where the actor said, "You sure about that?"
Guess who it is?
And
you watch the season, guess who it is?
And we said, "Yeah, no, we're quite sure you are going to die this year." And so there was a long conversation. Then we got a long letter explaining why this was a bad idea, which just made us want to kill that person that much more. So
The worrying thing about that is, and this is genuine, Thursday I got a text from David saying, "Is this still your number?"
I think just on that point, finally, is that you get tricked with this, with being in a long-running TV show. As an actor, if you're doing theatre or you're doing film, you get to meet a group of people, you work with that group of people for a couple of months, you move on. And that's the life. You get to meet a group of people, move on. Meet a group of people, move on. And you get very used to that. With this, you meet a group of people, you're with that group of people for years. and then you're fooled and tricked into thinking you're in a normal workplace, and of course you're not, and people die. So that's the weird thing about being on Thrones.
Good way.
People die.
Game of Thrones story.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. If you join me in thanking all of you.
Thank you.